Happy. If he does a nuclear test, I will not be happy.
Lawmakers sealing a deal on a $1 trillion spending bill to keep the government running.
Storms wreaking havoc in 4 states from Kansas down through Arkansas. The severe weather blamed for at least 10 deaths already.
Even though I know it caused a lot of speculation, guys, I'm not running, okay?
This week, we could see some movement on tax reform.
If we don't get this economy growing at 3%, we're never going to meet the obligations that we've made today.
I love your show. I call it Deface the Nation. But, you know, your show is sometimes not exactly correct.
President Trump declaring today Loyalty Day, a time for Americans to show their dedication to the U.S.
They are not with President Bush. Excuse me.
President
I'm so sorry, President Bush. I never thought I'd pray for the day that you were president again.
Is the sun always up this early?
We never see this shot, Brian. We never see the Washington Monument in the background. That's on the south side.
And you can see the Jefferson Memorial at the top of the picture, and then the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue down below, where today marks 102 days Donald Trump has been in residence. We're no longer counting down the first 100 days. Now we're going, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's
we're
the name
102.
of Martha's show now?
The show.
Oh, no,
The story.
Yeah. You know, I am so glad this 100-day mark is over. The specials, the series, the look back, the look for, and what for. I'm so glad we're at 102. And this way we can look forward. And let's hope for the next president, if there is a next president in 4 years, let's not even do it.
You know what this means? May is here. It's May Day. Do you remember in school May Day and having the celebration and taking the flowers around the maypole? That's right. It is May. Memorial Day is around the corner. It is summer. It is spring.
Right. Except for yesterday, where I froze.
It was cold here yesterday, but it was warm here on Saturday. That means we're in the transition period, you know, where one day's cold, one day's hot, one day's... That means it's on the way.
All right, Janice Dean, go to bed. We're talking about weather. We don't need you.
Anyway,
next 3 hours.
Thank you very much for joining us on day 102, and we've got some breaking news from overnight. Congressional lawmakers apparently have come up with a deal to avoid the government shutting down.
Democrats getting plenty of concessions, but money for a border wall? Nowhere to be found, and that's not all.
So do Republicans cave to pressure, or is just the deal that has to be done? Griff Jenkins joins us right now with the cost of the so-called trillion-dollar compromise.
Good morning, Brian, Angeline, and Steve. Yes, there is news. Congress has reached a bipartisan deal on a $1 trillion spending bill to avoid this shutdown and keep the government open until October. But it comes at what would appear to be a steep political price for the White House. The bill denies President Trump funding for construction of that border wall. And there's also no cuts to sanctuary cities and no cuts to Planned Parenthood. All key campaign promises. Democrats were quick to certainly take a victory lap. Chuck Schumer promises cooperation with the president as long as he agrees with him. Take a listen to this.
The bottom line is very simple. The president, if he works with us, particularly on issues like trade and infrastructure, we can work. But on the issues so far, taxes and health care, that's why his regime has had hardly any major successes, with the exception of Gorsuch. If he changes, we could work together.
Okay,
but he can't just dictate what he wants.
Now, the bill isn't entirely a cave to Democrats. It has a $15 billion down payment on the president's request to strengthen the military and $1.5 billion for border security. And it would also be the first major piece of bipartisan legislation to advance under this administration, just 102 days, as you point out, into it. Guys?
All right, Griff, thank you very much. I was noticing that some of the righty blogs are saying, so no money for the wall, but there's money for Planned Parenthood, which flies in the face of what a lot of Republicans have been saying.
People are upset about that, but there is more money for border security, as we were pointing out last week, and the president did say there will be a wall. He's going to work on it. I think he said September.
Yeah, I mean, it is, you know, right. The first round happened, but you want to win when it comes to the overall budget, and you need $1 trillion a stopgap. They look at the big picture and say, should we have the war right now in May, or do we wait to do it right in September? Let's just see how the year turns out.
Give a little here. You wind up with something, they wind up with something, and then when it's time to talk about health care, maybe you'll get Democrats. No, probably not.
I love Chuck Schumer.
Taxes, maybe.
Chuck Schumer's comment cracks me up. He says, if he changes, we can work together. So if he registers as a Democrat, we can work together.
All right, and we'll see if the lawmakers can actually stand up to Democrats, even though they're in the majority. Maybe they'll get the message that they have more people there.
Well, we know that yesterday Brian was cold because it was chilly here in the Northeast, but what were you doing on Saturday night? Were you watching television? If you did, you saw two very different programs. Screen left, there's the President of the United States in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He is not attending that same night. What is screened right at the Washington Hilton, the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, where usually it's a joke-filled speech by the President of the United States. He made it very clear he wasn't going to show up, and instead went to Pennsylvania and gave a rousing speech.
That's why people like him, because he says he's a man of the people. He's not there in the tuxedo giving praise to the media who's praising themselves. Instead, he wanted to go to the people. There was one guy there who had 2 Donald Trump buttons tacked to his cowboy hat. He had 15 colored markers and a big poster that said, "My president skipped dinner to give us dessert." And a lot of people signed. He passed out the magic markers and had people sign. 200 people signed his poster.
Right, so it was optics. It was a split screen. Who had the better screen? One, I think, had to be white balanced on the right. It seemed like the White House correspondent.
Blue, didn't it?
Looked a little blue. But here is the president in Pennsylvania.
A large group of Hollywood actors and Washington media, they are gathered together for the White House Correspondents' Dinner without the president. I could not possibly be more thrilled than to be more than 100 miles away from Washington Swamp, spending my evening with all of you. Let's rate the media's 100 days. Should we do that? Should we do it? Media outlets like CNN and MSNBC are fake news. Fake news. If the media's job is to be honest and tell the truth, then I think we would all agree the media deserves a very, very big, fat failing grade.
So while the president was in Harrisburg whipping up the crowd, a lot of loyalists there, they went ahead and they refocused the White House Correspondents Association dinner instead on the values of a free press. And keep in mind, it's also a scholarship dinner. Here is the president of the White House Correspondents Association, Jeff Mason, who is also from Reuters, essentially taking some of the words that the president has used in the past and directed them back at him.
Tonight, we must recognize that there are threats to press freedoms here in the United States. We must remain vigilant. The world is watching. Press access under President Trump has been very good. Nevertheless, we cannot ignore the rhetoric that has been employed by the president about who we are and what we do. We are not fake news. We are not failing news organizations. And we are not the enemy of the American people.
And you do not have the same tone with this president as you did the past president. You gave him a pass at almost every pass. And the reason why he would show up is because, as he mentioned in his very first, I believe, White House Correspondents' Dinner, it's good to be in front of my base. That was President Obama's quote. For President Trump, I think his main issue is when you put the commentary and bias into what's so-called reporting. Not saying it's necessary fiction, but there's a slant to it, and he cannot believe how little, I guess, leeway he's getting, and where people are not stepping back and saying, you know, maybe what he's doing is different, but it actually might be good. Right. And also, Jeff Mason got the interview with the president a couple of days before. And when the health care bill fell apart 2 weeks ago, he called the New York Times and Washington Post. So at one point, they're critical, but at the other point, he realizes he still gives them the time of day.
Yeah, he says he still gives us the access, and he still sits down with us and answers the questions. What's interesting, though, this is like watching the Oscars. You know, they talk about their agenda, and then everyone stands up, all the actors in Hollywood stand up. After he gave the speech saying we are not fake news, speaking to the mainstream media, all the mainstream media, of course, gives him a standing ovation.
You know what I thought was ironic was the fact that he said we are not fake news, and yet the host of the evening was a fake news man. from Comedy Central. It's the actual.
That's a great point.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, if you're going to say we're not fake news, don't hire a fake news guy. Meanwhile, a real newsman is John Dickerson, and yet there's Donald Trump sitting down on Face the Nation yesterday, giving it right to him. Watch this.
Oh, it's very funny when the fake media goes out, which we call the mainstream media, which sometimes I must say is you. But when the
me personally, or
your show, I love your show. I call it Deface the Nation. But your show is sometimes not exactly correct.
He's so nice about it. I call you Deface the Nation, but sometimes it's you.
Right.
But he is giving them access.
Yeah.
Right. And
no doubt about it.
And John Dickerson, I could tell you, I watch every Sunday because I'm lonely. I watch all the Sunday shows.
Because it's so cold on Sundays.
And it was just brutal. I showed up in shorts and a T-shirt, and although I looked good, I was freezing to death. So I had to run home even though my child was playing. I was more concerned about my long-term health. But John Dickerson has been, over the last month, I thought somebody at least stepping back a little and saying some of the things President Trump is doing is working. And he's put together this incredible staff. And he's empowered the secretaries of their divisions, whether it's Treasury or Secretary of State, to do their job. They say under the last two presidents, it really was very centralized in the Oval Office. Instead, he's putting people in charge and empowering them. And a lot of people are stepping back and going, it's interesting. Those are the experts.
The White House briefing room has never been this full. Plus, he has this dialogue with all of us on Twitter. The American people feel like they're included in the conversation. If you're in the media, even if you don't agree with what his stance is and his politics, you have to have fun listening to these sound bites.
Absolutely.
And he still carried on. He called everyone names during the election, and now he's doing it now that he's elected, Deface the Nation. I mean, that's funny. Even if you don't agree with it, it's funny.
No doubt about it.
Unless you're on that show.
With this president in the White House, we wake up in the morning, and when we're putting the show together, we go, okay, where do we start?
Well, Saturday Night Live makes fun of us, and I love it. So it doesn't offend me. I'm sure. I don't know. I hope they're laughing about it and have fun.
That's all. All right. It is 6:12 here in New York City, and Heather Childers joins us on this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Hope you had a great weekend. Everyone at
cold
home as well. Yeah, it was a little chilly, according to Brian. Well, the Detroit police officer is where we start, and this is a horrible story. He's fighting for his life at this hour after being shot in the head during an ambush. Now, the 14-year veteran responding to a domestic violence call with his partner when a man opened the front door, and then he just started shooting. That gunman killed in the shootout. The unidentified officer is now in, quote, very critical condition after undergoing surgery overnight. And now to some extreme weather and an incredible rescue caught on camera. Look at this in Texas. Some good Samaritans running straight into the rising floodwaters to save a father and his two babies. They were trapped inside that flipped car.
In the name of Jesus, let us breathe, Lord.
Amazingly, that limp baby you see there was revived with CPR and the power of prayer. That entire family will be okay. Thank goodness. And then that same storm system that brought that flood now moving east. Meteorologist Janice Dean with an update in just a few minutes you need to hear. And finally, President Trump declaring today Loyalty Day. That's a time for Americans to show their dedication to the U.S. of A. It is a tradition for presidents to mark the day every year. May 1st is also May Day, or International Workers' Day. Thousands expected to hit the streets nationwide for annual marches. The rallies typically highlight workers' rights, but this year many also plan to protest President Trump's immigration policies. Yeah, why not? May Day.
That's right. Thank you very much. Because apparently some of the activists are saying that even if they're in the country illegally, they deserve exactly the same rights that American citizens have. Meanwhile, warning from top military brass, we're striking ISIS so hard we're running out of bombs. So what does that mean for the United States to keep on the heat on terrorists? Brian's got a great guest coming up on that next.
General Tata.
Out of ISIS. I would bomb the hell out of ISIS, yes. I would increase the frequency like you wouldn't believe. I would bomb the out of them.
It looks like President Trump is sticking to that promise. The only problem, the U.S. stockpile can't keep up with the intensified fight to knock the heck out of ISIS. U.S. Admiral Harry Harris warning Congress last week that we are striking ISIS so hard that we are running out of bombs. So what can be done to keep our military prepared for the fight against terror? Here to weigh in on this is former Deputy Commanding General of U.S. Forces in Afghanistan and best-selling author of that book right there, Besieged, General Tony Tata. Thank you so much for being with us, General. What is your response to this? Thank you. What is your response to this? Are we knocking the heck out of them that we're running out of bombs?
Well, what we've really got is about 3 major regional contingencies going on at one time. We've got the heavy fight in Mosul all the way to Raqqa, Syria. We've got ISIS in Afghanistan now. We have the Taliban spring offensive. And President Trump is true to his word. Over the last 90 days, we have ramped up operations tempo, which causes a theater redistribution of the bombs that we use in these kinds of wars. And so we've moved from Pacific Command to Central Command stockpiles so that we can keep up with the operations tempo that the commanders on the ground need to crush this enemy. Meanwhile, we have North Korea rattling its sabers, and the Pacific Command commander is saying, you know, I need some help here. And because of the Obama budget cuts, it's put us in a lagging position where we need to catch up with the industrial base needs to catch up with us.
All right. So what do you recommend? If the president is listening, what does he need to do to make sure we have enough in that stockpile to continue the fight?
Well, I'm sure H.R. McMaster and Secretary Mattis have both recommended to him already that we light a torch under the industrial base, get more of these munitions produced, because right now what we have is North Korea on the border with 6,000 artillery pieces that can range the greater Seoul metropolitan region, and we need to be able to do counterfire. We have Q-36 radars that can pick up on their conventional artillery weapons, and we need to be able to rapidly counterfire. So we need the stockpiles ready to respond to any kind of North Korean provocation. And we also need an Air Force that can drop the kinds of bombs that we're dropping right now on all these other places I just mentioned. And so we need to get the stockpiles pre-positioned in North Korea so that we can fight another major regional contingency.
All right, General Tata, thank you for being with us. Great perspective this morning. Hopefully they're listening. All right, chaos at 30,000 feet. Passengers left with broken bones after turbulence shakes a plane beyond belief. We're going to take you inside that cabin. And President Trump slamming Senator Chuck Schumer for being a bad leader and dooming the Democrats. But will the president need Chuck Schumer's help to pass health care and tax reform? The brothers, the Woodhouse brothers, they're going to duke it out. Coming up next.
The hero Army platoon leader who paid the ultimate price in the fight against ISIS. He's First Lieutenant Weston Lee, and he was killed by an IED in Iraq on Saturday. The 25-year-old was awarded the Bronze Star Medal, Purple Heart, and Meritorious Service Medal for his service. Friends and family decorating his Georgia home with the flags in his honor. He is the third American killed in the fight against ISIS in just 1 week. Steve.
All right. Thank you, Brian. President Trump calling out Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer at a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday, saying Schumer's leading the party to doom.
Senator Schumer's a bad leader, not a natural leader at all. He works hard to study leadership. When you have to study leadership, you got problems.
So is the president right here with the debate? The brothers Woodhouse, former DNC communications director and Democratic strategist Brad Woodhouse, along with his brother, screen right, executive director of the North Carolina GOP, Dallas Woodhouse. Brothers, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Brad, I am so sorry that Chuck Schumer is leading your party to doom.
Well, look, I tell you, Steve, I've never seen anyone who projects onto other people their own inadequacies like Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump finished first 100 days as president.
Oh, suddenly you're Dr. Phil.
You talk about well, exactly. You talk about a failed leader. He didn't pass one piece of legislation that he promised the American people. He didn't fund the wall. He didn't get health care, his version of health care passed. Well, I mean, 3 times he tried and failed, Steve. He has, you know, on top of it, as you mentioned earlier, they made a spending agreement last night. He got nothing in it that he wanted. He's the failed leader here. He's the one leading his party and the country to doom.
All right, Dallas, it does sound as if the Republicans are talking about they might have the votes for health care this week. But what do you make of Chuck Schumer as the leader of the Senate on the Democratic side?
Well, I love President Trump, but I'd like to give him one piece of advice. Shh! Don't tell them how bad he is. We want him to keep doing it. Look, I don't think Chuck Schumer is a very attractive kind of person to have on television and articulating for the Democrats. And, of course, they have their challenges in 2018. I would just like to also add, Steve, that I feel very good about the opportunity for health care this week. I was with Mark Meadows, the leader of the Freedom Caucus. We had party conventions out west this weekend, and we talked for a while, and he says he's been working very close with the president, and everything is coming together. So I'm very optimistic.
We've heard that story before.
Yeah, okay, so Dallas, this time it sounds like the Freedom Caucus is on board, but what about the moderates? Because they were the ones who were abandoning ship last time and caused the no vote.
You know, I think you're going to see the president put together the coalition of Republicans to get this done. It's taken a little bit of time, but I think he's going to earn a lot of credit for, you know, working through the process to get the thread through a very difficult needle.
All right. You know, Brad, you did mention that with this continuing resolution that it sounds like both sides are going to sign up on Capitol Hill to keep the government running through September. The Republicans did not wind up with as many things as they had hoped for. You know, there is no money for the wall. There is more money for the federal defense, which is terrific, about $15 billion, and I think $1.5 billion for increased border security. But when you look at the president's first 100 days, I was hearing some expert historian on television say that in his first 100 days, Donald Trump signed more bills into law than any president since Harry Truman. So obviously, they've gotten some stuff done in Washington.
Well, look, he signed a bunch of Congressional Review Act bills. These are bills that repeal previous regulations put in place by President Obama. They don't require 60 votes in the Senate. He hadn't passed a single piece of signature legislation or accomplished any of the big promises that he promised. Remember, it's not just about legislation, Steve. He said he was going to label China a currency manipulator. He backed off. He said he was going to pull out NAFTA. He backed off. He said he was going to make the other member countries in NATO pay more. He backed off. He's backed off of everything. He said he was going to make Mexico pay for the wall. He backed off. He has failed in every major promise he made to the American people.
But you know, Brad, that what he has said is, okay, I backed off of the currency manipulation title because now I'm trying to get China to help us with North Korea. And each of those things that you listed, it's all about a negotiation, which he's an expert at.
It's an excuse for everything.
All right, Brad and
let
Dallas.
me just say this. He surely did not fail at bombing the blank out of ISIS.
All right, there you go. And he also got Gorsuch. All right, Brad and Dallas.
After they changed the rules,
The Senate had to change Harry Reid changed the rule to start.
Well, I understand that, but the Senate had to change the rule to get his Supreme Court nominee.
All right, Brad and Dallas, always a pleasure. Fellas, thank you very much for joining us on this Monday. All right. What do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Meanwhile, Congress wants to question her about misusing top secret intel, but now Susan Rice is back for a lecture on national security?
The United States, Fareed, is supposed to be the grown-up at the dinner table. We're not supposed to be the crazy aunt in the attic that nobody knows what is going to do next.
Is she the right person to be giving the president pointers? Our next guest will say no, so stick around for that. And a trip to the mall wound up being a little more than one woman bargained for when she found a cryptic note inside her new purse. What she read between the lines will send chills down your spine.
When I was younger, so much younger than today, never needed anybody's help in any way.
Winning means winning for the American people, that either we win or whoever wins understands the priorities of the American people, and they are not with President Bush. Excuse me. I'm so sorry, President Bush. I never thought I'd pray for the day that you were president again, but...
You're praying for the day that President Bush is president again?
Well, we worked, and so you asked the question, how would I work with a Republican president? The way we worked with President Bush. We got a great deal accomplished. We opposed him on the war in Iraq vociferously. We opposed him on his privatization of Social Security, but we worked with him on many other issues.
Will you pinch me?
Yeah, what's going on?
I think I'm dreaming.
Yeah, that was.
She's trying to cover up for the fact that she called out the wrong president.
Right. But I mean, she seemed to have not liked President Bush in every way. Although President Bush reached out to her the first day he lost the House, he said, "Come on over, let's meet and see where we can work together."
So but at the end of his administration, I mean, the Democrats were all 100% seemingly squarely against George W. Bush.
And she was against the surge, which, by the way, worked, as does Senator
Just goes
Obama.
to show you how the power of 8 or 9 years.
I know. That's what, I mean, we've
It's
all
very
been guilty
healing.
of accidentally saying President Barack Obama instead of President Trump, because it's only been 100 days. But that was like 10 years ago when President Bush was in office.
All right, let's bring in former Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Executive Director, National Center for Policy Analysis, and a former U.S. Congressman and a Fox News contributor as well. Good morning to you, sir.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you all doing?
Is Nancy Pelosi misremembering her cooperation with President Bush? That was when you were probably still in uniform most of those days.
Yeah, I don't think she's misremembering. I mean, that was some very tenuous moments. And when you talk about how they stood vociferously against the Iraq war, look at what we have to deal with now. We have the support to President Obama completely withdrawing all the troops out of there. We created a vacuum. When we had victory, now we had defeat.
Colonel, what do you make of the Democrats' criticism of our new President Trump so far, 102 days in?
Well, I think the most important thing we have to come to realize is that Democrats have not gone back to the strategy table and really assessed themselves from a policy perspective to understand why they lost. They continue to, denigrate, demean, and attack other people and not look at themselves and say, what can we do to improve? What can we do to improve our relations with the American people? I think that there is a poll that says 67 to 70% of Americans believe the Democrat Party is out of touch with the American people. And I'm here in my hometown of Atlanta for the NRA convention on 146th. And for people to not understand that the Americans have a Second Amendment right and they should be able to defend and protect themselves, this is something that the Democrat Party and the progressive socialists thereof are against. So that once again shows how they're out of touch with mainstream America.
Go ahead, sir.
Colonel Susan Rice resurfaced, and she's back in the media now, and she's criticizing President Trump right now on his national security. Listen to this, and then we'll get your reaction.
The United States, Fareed, is supposed to be the grown-up at the dinner table. We're not supposed to be the crazy aunt in the attic that nobody knows what is going to do next. That unpredictability may be useful to somebody like Kim Jong-un in North Korea. It's not the way the United States is supposed to act, and I think our allies have been off balance and uncertain in a way that doesn't serve our interests.
So is the president the crazy aunt in the attic?
Well, I got to tell you, why would you have Susan Rice, a person with no credibility, out on the show talking about national security? And if she wants to refer to the Trump administration as the crazy aunt in the attic, we know that the Obama administration was the whiny, snotty-nosed little crying child in a dirty diaper. Look, our allies now know that the United States of America stands for something. We have a deterrent force. We have a credible military option that can back up our foreign policy strategy. You did not see that in the years of Obama administration. There is no foreign policy for national security success that the Obama administration can point back to. And again, why would you have someone that has such a dearth of credibility when it comes to truthfulness as Susan Rice talking about national security?
Colonel, before you go, what do you think about the direction this president is heading with North Korea?
Well, I think the most important thing, and again, I was stationed on the Korean Peninsula in 1995. If you remember, in 1994, Bill Clinton gave a speech about his nuclear arms treaty that he made with North Korea, and we see where that has gotten us. We have got to stand up to this dictator and this despot, Kim Jong-un, but most importantly, we have to put the pressure on China to take control of the situation in North Korea, or Korean Peninsula will be unified and allied to the United States of America. So I think we're on the right track to standing up.
Are you against the concept of having South Korea paid for the THAAD missile system, which costs $1 billion, and it's us protecting them?
Well, I think one of the most important things is when we have these status of forces agreements, we need to make sure that we have mutual agreements that mutually support what we're doing and not have the entire financial onus placed upon the United States of America. We cannot continue to go on and, provide our services and our defense capabilities without people assisting us. And that's what allies should do.
All right. Colonel West, thank you very much for joining us today from Atlanta. Travel safely.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Colonel. All right, let's go to extreme weather now. A pile of rubble is all that is left of a Texas church. It was pulverized by a tornado. The parish, packed with dozens of people, as the storm passed through. Everyone walked away, though, unhurt, thankfully.
Unbelievable.
And historic flooding devastating multiple states. Incredible video showing a trailer that was swept away in all the rushing waters in Missouri.
We now turn to Janice Dean, tracking that storm as it moves to the east. Good morning, JD.
Good morning. Yeah, hundreds of reports of severe weather, including hail and damaging winds. And just within the last 24 hours, reports of tornadoes. And this is going to be an ongoing threat throughout the day today. So let's take a look at it. First of all, the temperatures. You've got the cooler than average temperatures behind this frontal system and a very powerful area of low pressure that continues now to move across the Mississippi River Valley and towards the Ohio Valley. And you can see the storm reports all weekend. Hundreds of reports of hail and damaging winds and over a dozen reports of tornadoes across Louisiana, Mississippi. This system is moving eastward. You can see that spin, that area of low pressure across the Midwest. And with that, we saw record snow across areas of Kansas and Oklahoma over the weekend. And you mentioned the flooding, historic flooding, record flooding, where we have flood watches and warnings posted. 6 to 8 inches of heavy rain in just a matter of hours. So there's where we have our flash flood watches and warnings. And again, this system moving eastward across the mid-Atlantic and the northeast later on this afternoon. So again, the risk for hail, damaging winds, even tornadoes over millions of folks. We'll certainly keep you posted. All right, back inside. Heather, to you.
There's a hint. Yes, I'm next. Thank you very much, Janice. We'll keep an eye on that. Meantime, a nightmare in the skies as sudden turbulence tosses passengers around like toys, leaving several injured. Look at this horrific video. Can you imagine inside this cabin showing people lying in the aisles, snacks, I should say, scattered everywhere.